My elder sister and I passed away on the same day. She was a first-rank noble lady by imperial decree, while I was the Empress Dowager Xiaojiao, personally appointed by the late emperor. All my life, I had outshone her, yet at the end, her body was secretly sent into the late emperor's mausoleum. I was empress for 10 years and empress dowager for 40, yet in the end, I can only be buried in a consort's mausoleum before my spirit tablet. The Son of Heaven looks ashamed to be buried together. With Lady Jiaping was our late emperor's dying wish. If you hadn't stubbornly opposed it back then, he would not have died young, unable to attain the love he sought. If there is a next life, Your Majesty, please grant them your blessing. When I opened my eyes again, I had truly returned to the day of the consort selection banquet. I still became the crown princess designated by the empress, but when Wei Xianru proposed, as in the previous life, to take my elder sister as a secondary consort, I paused and said with an indifferent expression, "As your highness wishes." The words fell, and a profound silence followed. Wei Xian lifted his eyelids when he looked at me, his usually indifferent eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed he hadn't expected me to agree so easily after all. In my previous life, I burst into tears on the spot and remained silent. The empress also directly rebuked Wei Xian for being foolish. That girl's birth mother was just a concubine who knew nothing but seductive tricks, truly unfit for any respectable occasion. I have already arranged another match for her. Beware of beauty's ruin. You had best put this thought out of your mind as soon as possible. A few brief words completely severed the bond between them. Neither I nor the empress knew it at the time. Long before the consort selection banquet, he had already met Shen Tong at the Zhongyuan Lantern Festival. A single distant glance was all it took for him to fall in love at first sight. Meeting at the temple, he picked up her handkerchief. The dignified and reserved crown prince chased after her for 3 miles in the muddy rain, just to exchange a few more words with her. He was not briefly infatuated with her, but deeply in love, and it had been so since that very day. The empress couldn't believe it. She repeatedly pressed the question, "Leah, are you truly willing?" I simply said, "As the crown prince's consort, I must be magnanimous." The matter now settled, the empress found it difficult to say more. His Majesty is critically ill. The day of his passing into the heavens is not far off. The wedding is set for the 10th day of next month. Shen Tong and I will be married into the Eastern Palace on the same day as a festive blessing to ward off misfortune. Everything is settled as the banquet disperses. Wei Xian and I pass by each other. He suddenly stopped walking and said flatly, "You're quite magnanimous, miss." I looked over upon hearing this. Wei Xian lowered his gaze, having gotten what he wished for. There was no trace of joy on his face. Back in the carriage, Lu Ji looked anxious. "How could you agree to that, my lady? What if she gains favor? Wouldn't that bring disaster upon us?" I slowly opened my eyes. Sooner or later, there will be a favored consort in the palace. Although Shen Tong is beautiful, she has little wit. Better her than someone else. The most important thing is Shen Tong's body is too weak for her to bear children. In her previous life, she married into a marquis's household and sought out renowned physicians far and wide, yet she never bore a single child. No matter how much favor a woman like this receives, she poses no threat. It's actually quite a good shield. Green Bao was stunned by my words. She was silent for a moment. "But, miss, you have feelings for the crown prince. Are you truly not the least bit bothered?" A moment of silence passed. I said calmly, "Does it matter whether I care or not? It's useless. It would only add to the sorrow." In the previous life, Wei Xian was only 27 when he died. By then, we had already been married for 10 years. I am the legitimate daughter of the Shen family. My mother comes from a prestigious clan and is a close childhood friend of the empress. Since I was young, I have known that I would marry Wei Xian in the future. Thus, since childhood, I have been studying his likes and dislikes, learning how to be a virtuous wife and a dignified empress. After our marriage, my heart and eyes were filled with no one but him. I managed the consorts dutifully and served the Empress Dowager with filial piety, never once troubling him with the affairs of the harem. He, in turn, gave me all the dignity befitting an empress. Over the years, no matter how many charming and noble-born consorts there were, none could surpass the favor I received. Even in the final moment of his life, he held my hand with a gloomy expression, his eyes lowered. "If there is an afterlife, I will still take you as my Empress. The deep affection between the emperor and empress was a legendary romance. But no one knew. Just a stick of incense ago, he drove me out of the hall and would only allow Shentong to keep him company. Unable to resist, I stood outside the screen and eavesdropped. Holding her hand, he said in a bitter tone, "In this life, you and I were fated to miss each other after all. 100 years from now, I want to be buried beside you." Shentong wept. "But Empress," at the mention of me, Wei Xian let his hands fall, his expression weary. "I've spent a lifetime playing a role for her. That's exhausting enough. In the afterlife, I don't want to see her again." After Wei Xian died, I fell ill in my dream. He was still not yet 20, a clear, cold youth in red, lifting my bridal veil. The dragon phoenix wedding candle melts, dripping onto my damp hair. He restrains himself as he brushes it away, pecking my neck with utmost gentleness, drop by drop. What was once as sweet as honey has now become arsenic. I have been ill for 3 months. After recovering, he summoned Shentong at the first opportunity. She initially hesitated and denied it, but soon confessed everything: how they met, got to know each other, fell in love. Even though they had each married other people, he still looked after her for a lifetime. Her dowry was meager, yet she could adorn herself with gems from the West and spend money like water. She beat to death a virtuous concubine in her chamber, yet in the court, the magistrate cowered and pronounced her not guilty. Behind all this, the Son of Heaven was her patron. She recounted every detail, her expression brimming with barely concealed pride. "I am the legitimate daughter, outshining her in every way, from birth to marriage." But at this moment, she looked at me with pity, tinged with a hint of defiance. "Dear sister, you truly are a pitiful soul." Pitiful? I gazed back at her calmly and couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. I once pitied myself too, fooled by Wei Xian my entire life, living in the illusion of a loving marriage, like a joke. But now, I am the Empress Dowager, ruling behind the curtain, honored by all under heaven. Whom he loves or hates seems insignificant compared to the wealth and glory of the coming decades. Even if I were to live this life over again, I would still marry Wei Xian. For one thing, my mother has nurtured me for many years, and I cannot let all that effort go to waste. Secondly, this great path to the heavens is something only he can give me. As for marital affection, it is a worthless thing that I can do without. Just like in my previous life, the emperor died on the very night when Wei Xian and I got married. After the funeral, the new monarch ascended the throne as I wished. I became the empress. Yet Shentong's rank and title remained undecided for a long time. The Ministry of Rites proposed the title of virtuous consort, de Fei. Shentong was so dissatisfied that she broke down in tears several times and even went on a hunger strike. Wei Xian had no choice but to consult with me gently. "It's already a hardship for her to be a concubine. I want to make her an imperial noble consort as a small compensation. What do you think?" There has never been a precedent in this dynasty of elevating someone to the rank of imperial noble consort without merit. However, I said respectfully, "Your Majesty may decide as you wish." Wei Xian quietly watched me. His deep gaze rested on my calm face, and I had no idea what he was thinking. After a long while, he let out a mild and indifferent sigh. "You've been wronged. As compensation, my elder brother was promoted to minister, a third-rank official position. When it came time to choose a palace, Shentong stirred up trouble again. She set her sights on Changchun Palace, the most luxurious hall among the 6 palaces. Green Branch was so furious she stomped her feet. "It should be your highness who chooses the palace first, and only then would it be her turn. There's a distinction between legitimate and illegitimate. Doesn't she understand? She's not ignorant, it's just that those who are doted on can't help but take it for granted." I didn't put Wei Xian in a difficult position and took the initiative to choose Zhongshui Palace. It is indeed an elegant and splendid residence. The only drawback was that it was very far from the Hall of Mental Cultivation. But this time, Wei Xian actually did not agree. He said displeased, "You are the empress. What is the meaning of living in such an out-of-the-way place? Rank has its distinctions. You should live peacefully in the Palace of Eternal Spring." I said, "Oh." I tried to get up, but he gripped my wrist. Wei Xian looked at me calmly. "Here is timid, so I've spent a few more days with her lately. Do you resent it?" I silently lowered my eyes. This concubine would not dare. "In that case, I shall stay here tonight." I tried to refuse. We are still in the mourning period, it matters not. His eyes lowered slightly, carrying a hint of a smile. I won't do anything else, I simply wish to be close to the Empress. A moment of silence passed. I frowned almost imperceptibly. I'm afraid Consort Gui will be displeased. For the harmony of the harem, Your Majesty should go to her. As the words fell, the hall fell silent for a moment. Wei Xian smiled unhurriedly. Is the Empress sulking with me? I quietly watched him. She did not understand why he suddenly seemed so pleased. In my past life, I appeared magnanimous on the surface, but in private, I had a bit of a temper. It was probably because I cared that I felt jealous, and when he hadn't come to see me for a long time, I would sulk and cry, even ignoring him. Back then, Wei Xian was very tolerant of me. He would even set aside his pride to appease me, saying in a helpless tone, "Oh, my Empress, what if I promise never to leave you alone again? Would that be acceptable?" I once reflected on myself and asked him with a hint of shyness, "Am I being a bit too jealous?" He smiled and shook his head. "That's hardly jealousy. It's clear that your feelings for me run deep, and I like that about you, yet no amount of fondness could compare to the flutter of a heart in those bygone days." Just like tonight, he hadn't really wanted to leave. Upon hearing the maid say that Shentong was ill, he rose and left without hesitation. A light rain began to fall outside the window. Relieved, I took Green Branch for a stroll in the Imperial Garden. The misty rain left its imprint on the lake's surface. The lake water is green, and the sky is also green, just like the figure of the clearing sky not far away, tall and expansive. I stopped, our eyes met, and the boy bowed to me in the cold wind, then turned and walked away. He had a cold demeanor, even his gaze was indifferent, carrying an indescribable aloofness. Green Branch let out a soft gasp of surprise. That is, the future top scholar, Green Branch, completely unaware of anything amiss, was filled with awe. So young, truly remarkable. I couldn't help but laugh. What's so remarkable about that? He was merely one of the guests in my private chambers in my past life. On the first day of the mourning period's end, Wei Xian requested Shentong's company. Those in the palace, adept at reading the wind, quickly discerned who was favored and groveled accordingly. Compared to the blooming prosperity of Shentong's palace, Changchun Palace lay desolate and forlorn. I, too, was in no rush, and made my way daily to Changshou Palace. The Dowager Empress has finally come into her own, spending her days enjoying flowers and tending to tea with great delight. When I arrived, she was lying on a couch, idly watching a handsome young man play the zither. Seeing me, she smiled and beckoned me to sit beside her. "Hold on for a few more decades, and you'll be able to enjoy such good fortune too." It reminded me of the previous life. My ears turned slightly red at the remark. Seeing this, the Dowager Empress waved the young man away and said mysteriously, "Do you have anyone you like outside the palace?" I was taken aback and quickly shook my head. This son would not dare. She laughed heartily. "Silly child, what's wrong with that? Women from prestigious families like ours mostly end up marrying someone other than the one they have feelings for. When your mother and I were your age, we both had young gentlemen we fancied, but unfortunately." She sighed wistfully for a moment, then looked up at me with a glint of gossip in her eyes. "I used to think you liked my son, but after seeing how you've acted in the palace, I realize you're just like me, entering the palace only to continue the family's honor." Lan Shu, have you ever loved someone you couldn't have? A host of shadows flitted through my mind in that instant. I smiled shyly, lowered my head, and admitted, "Yes, I do." The moment the words fell, the hall fell silent for an instant. At the entrance, someone stood expressionlessly, though no one knew how long they had been listening. I looked up and only caught a fleeting glimpse of imperial yellow. The sky was overcast, and rain was threatening to fall from the mountains. That very evening, the decree for me to move to Zhongshui Palace was issued. What appeared to be a palace transfer was in fact an expulsion. The decree, coming down relentlessly, made it crystal clear to the entire imperial city that the Empress had offended the dragon's countenance and had already fallen from favor. I don't even have time to pack my things. Even among the servants, I can only take Luji with me. Fine strands of icy sleet, mixed with the damp, cold wind, lashed against the long palace path. Luji struggled to hold an umbrella, gritting her teeth, and staggered to shield me in her arms. The umbrella ribs were snapped by the force of the wind, but there was still a long way to go. Luji looked at her empty hands, This servant will go back at once and fetch another one." She glanced at my rain-soaked clothes and was momentarily at a loss. Was I simply to be left to stand in the rain, drenched and wretched? I said, "Then let's borrow one." Not far away, someone was walking this way holding an umbrella. The bright red court robe set off jade-like skin. My clothes were soaked through, and so were my eyes, as I watched him helplessly like this. After a long moment, he took a step back. He coldly put down the umbrella and turned to leave. Luigi murmured softly, "Isn't that the top scholar from the Imperial Garden the other day?" I watched his retreating figure in silence before Zhongshui Palace. A bright, tender pink figure was quietly reflected in the puddles. Shen Tong, wrapped in a gold-threaded cloak, had the radiant complexion of someone dearly cherished. She pressed the now cold hand warmer into my hand. "Sister, please take it. Unlike me, even if you freeze, no one will spoil you." I didn't take it, fingering the umbrella in my hand. The bamboo frame was cheap, yet warm to the touch. Actually, His Majesty wasn't really that angry. She looked at me, beaming with a smile. "I was the one who told him how you schemed and plotted to get close to him, just for the position of Empress. I also told him how you've been bullying me at home all these years, often beating and cursing me. It was to get even for me that he drove you off to Zhongshui Palace. Little sister, you've been basking in success since childhood. Did you ever imagine you'd end up like this today?" It really was her. I quietly looked at her and laughed. Saying, "Thank you," I settled down in Zhongshui Palace, living in seclusion from the rest of the world. With the Empress Dowager's patronage, my supply of food and clothing remained the same as before. She also sent someone to pass on a message. "Zhong'e is just momentarily confused. As long as you lower your head and coax him a little, everything will be fine." I agreed, but did not move. I merely said I had caught a cold and asked the Imperial Hospital to send a physician for treatment. Zhongshui Palace was located on the outermost edge of the harem. Usually it was desolate, with few people around. Even the maids and eunuchs rarely came here. But if any external minister needed to enter the Hall of Mental Cultivation for discussions, they would have to pass through this place. When I saw Zhu Jinghe again, I was only wearing a thin garment. He stopped in his tracks and saluted me from afar. "Empress." I returned the umbrella to him. He stood still, and I smiled. "It looks like it's going to rain again, my lord, so you'd better take this. If you get caught in the rain, Your Highness, I would be heartbroken." Zhu Jinghe lowered his gaze. "Mind your words, my lady." He walked a few steps away, but he turned back, unfastened his coat, and draped it over my shoulders. In the end, he placed the umbrella back at my feet. I watched him. I suddenly remembered how, in my memories, he had once stood just as stubbornly in the wind and snow, declining the cloak I offered. This humble subject dares not accept Her Majesty's gracious reward without having earned it. I am undeserving. He looked up at me, aloof and defiant, with a touch of arrogant disdain. He had every right to be that arrogant, rising from a humble background to become a minister of state and a member of the Grand Council. He was the most trusted courtier of Wei Xian during his lifetime. But then it was also him, red-eyed, kneeling and prostrating at my feet, his voice hoarse. "Your servant was wrong. I beg you to punish me, but no matter what, please don't ignore me." Zhu Jinghe died in the 10th year of my time as Empress Dowager. A cup of poisoned wine went down his throat. He lay quietly in my arms. I stroked his face and said softly, "If I could do it all over again, I would have several children with you and live a proper life." He looked at me silently. He seemed to smile faintly, or perhaps not. Finally, he said, "It's a deal." I never expected that the next life would actually come. I glanced at the darkening sky and leaned lazily against the door. "You don't want an umbrella, sir? Are you planning to come inside to take shelter from the rain?" Just like in my previous life, after Wei Xian ascended to power, he heavily promoted capable ministers from humble backgrounds. If things continued to develop this way, Zhu Jinghe would rise to the Grand Secretariat and become Wei Xian's most trusted confidant. After all, that was exactly what had happened in the previous life before Wei Xian's death. He had already become the principal minister assisting with state affairs, wielding control over the imperial court. But against all expectations, Zhu Jinghe declined and instead requested to be assigned to the Hanlin Academy to compile classics. Wei Xian, who valued talent, was deeply regretful. "You've studied hard for over a decade. Are you truly content with such a minor post?" With no ambition for a position at court, your servant's aspirations lie elsewhere. Wei Xian sighed. Very well, I appoint you as a scholar of the inner school, residing within the palace so that you may often discuss poetry and prose with me. I had been hiding from work in Zhongshui Palace for 3 months. Even on the day of the imperial selection, I pleaded illness and did not attend. With Shentong around, most of the consorts from the previous life who stood out for their family background and beauty would likely not enter the palace, but those who remain are no ordinary figures either. I feigned illness, and the authority to manage the 6 palaces naturally fell into Shentong's hands. She, too, wished to run the imperial harem well and earn a reputation for virtue, yet she had grown up by the side of a concubine, having never learned how to oversee internal affairs, assist the ruler in governing the inner court, or how to manage the harem and restrain the concubines. The harem was soon rife with turmoil. Shentong, overly ambitious and having long enjoyed the emperor's exclusive favor, would not allow anyone to compete with her. It was heard that a certain concubine had been particularly fortunate. On the first night she attended to the emperor, she became pregnant. Shentong, feeling wronged, shed tears before Wei Xian and insisted on raising the child. Upon hearing the news, the consort was overcome with rage and anguish, and as a result, she lost her own child. When the commotion reached the ears of the Dowager Empress, she demoted Shentong, saying, "A mere lowly maid dares to dispute the upbringing of the imperial heir." Since entering the palace, Shentong had always had everything going her way. She had never endured such grievance. She spent her days crying and causing trouble in her chambers. The Empress Dowager summoned Wei Xian and reprimanded him, saying, "I told you long ago, this woman has a wicked heart and is a menace. If it were the Empress managing the harem right now, how could so many things have gone wrong?" After 3 months, Wei Xian once again stepped into my palace. I gazed at Wei Xian's weary expression. Obediently rising, I massaged his shoulders. He sat quietly, without a word, until his shoulder grew slightly damp. Suddenly realizing, he raised a hand to wipe the corner of my eye. "Why is the Empress crying?" I whispered. "I thought your Majesty would not come again." Wei Xian looked at me with a deep, somber gaze. I took the opportunity to kneel down, my eyes glistening with tears. "Since my youth, Your Majesty, I have held you in my heart, yearning only to live in harmony with you, like a lute and its song. After learning that Your Majesty cherished my elder sister, I dared not vie for your favor. As long as Your Majesty is happy, I would willingly forego your affection for a lifetime." I sobbed softly. "I do not know where I have displeased Your Majesty, that I am so utterly cast aside." In the corner of his eye, Wei Xian's expression shifted slightly. He helped me up, pulled me into his arms, and gently patted my back. "It is my fault," he sighed softly, as if reproaching himself. "We've grown up together for so many years. Of course I know what kind of person you are." Of course he knew, but when imperial power is in hand, the grievances of others matter little. I leaned against his shoulder, expressionless. That night, Wei Shensu stayed in my palace. The imperial consort's maids knelt outside Zhongshui Palace for an entire night, yet still could not summon him away from me. Wei Xian asked me if I wanted to move back to Changchun Palace. I thought for a moment and declined. He stroked the hair on my forehead and said, "What, have you gotten used to living in this remote place? This is a good place. I am reluctant to leave it, Your Majesty. I truly and thoroughly spoiled my favorite, but it still wasn't enough." At the Royal Hunting Lodge, Wei Xian hosted a banquet for the officials. After several rounds of wine, an assassin struck. There was also such an event in the previous life. The assassin shot 3 arrows, all blocked by Wei Xian's secret guards. When the first arrow flew toward us, I shut my eyes tightly and stood firmly in front of Wei Xian. But this time, for some reason, that arrow evaded the guards and struck me directly in the shoulder. It hurt. I wanted to cry, but instinctively held back, sliding down limply. I eventually collapsed into Wei Xian's arms. He called out to me incessantly, his tone anxious. I looked at him in a daze, but my thoughts drifted to the sight in my peripheral vision of the person who stumbled and knocked over the tea. The imperial physician Shu, who has always been following me, came to take my pulse. He withdrew his hand with a calm expression. "Your Highness's injuries are not serious." However, Wei Xian's tone darkened. "However what?" Unable to hold on any longer, I drifted into a drowsy sleep. When I woke up, Wei Xian was holding a bowl of herbal medicine. His brows and eyes were softened by the warm mist. "Empress, we're going to have a child." The Empress's joyful news brought celebration throughout the palace. Wei Xian rewarded the entire Zhongshui palace with 6 months' worth of allowances. He was overwhelmed with joy, completely didn't notice. The way I looked at him was like looking at someone who was about to die. After I became pregnant, Wei Xian often came to see me. After the third dinner, he said with a smile in his voice that he would stay the night. I put on a serious expression. "There are many sisters in the harem who have yet to receive your favor. Your Majesty should spread your blessings evenly." The smile on Wei Xian's face gradually faded. The Empress is truly virtuous. I waited for him to rise and leave, but he did not move, and his tone was dejected. "I always feel that you are no longer the same as you were in your youth," I said. "People always change. Your servant was once an unmarried young lady in her boudoir, but now I am the mother of the nation. The more I bear, the more I have to let go." Wei Xian looked deeply into my eyes. He said, "I only hope that the Empress treats me with a sincere heart." With no one else in between, I began to take over the affairs of the palace once more. The first thing was to dismiss the excess maids from the imperial consort's palace and redistribute them to other palaces. Shun Tong bathed daily in rose petals and milk, spending hundreds of taels of silver at every turn, an excessive waste that I took it upon myself to abolish. She protested to Wei Xian, who merely said offhandedly, "The Empress is the master of the inner court. You would do well to obey her." When Shun Tong tried to speak further, Wei Xian had already waved her away. She looked at his cold expression in disbelief. She thought that winning the Emperor's favor would allow her to get the better of me. But she never realized that favor is nothing but a flower in a mirror or the moon reflected in water. The moment she gained it, she had already begun to lose it. Now I have rank, offspring, and favor in hand, but she had nothing, empty-handed. When Wei Xian came to see me, I was lying listlessly in bed. His face darkened as he turned to the imperial physician. "Is the Empress unwell?" Shu, the imperial physician, looked grave. "Her Highness has been frightened, and her pregnancy is unstable." What on earth could have caused such a fright? Greenbow knelt down, choking back tears. Her Majesty only wished to uphold order in the rear palace. She never expected noble consort to defy her to her face and then rushed to the Hall of Mental Cultivation to lodge a complaint. Her Majesty did not sleep well all night. Physician Shu also added, "For a pregnant woman, nothing is worse than taxing the spirits. If this happens again, I fear the imperial heir may be harmed." With just a few words exchanged, Wei Xian's expression turned extremely grim. He held my hand and was silent for a long time. "Empress, I have wronged you. I have indulged imperial consort for too long. I shall teach her a lesson." The imperial edict soon arrived. Imperial consort Shen, having failed in proper conduct and being willful and disrespectful, is hereby demoted to the rank of Pin and confined to her residence for 6 months. The once bustling courtyard fell into desolation. I don't need to lift a finger. The imperial concubines, who loathed her to the bone, had already bribed the imperial household department to take good care of her. Shun Tong was already frail after such a misfortune. She was even more deficient in both qi and blood. The imperial physician reported that she doesn't have much longer to live. Upon hearing this, a trace of gloom flickered in Wei Xian's eyes, but it was merely gloom. Holding me in his arms, he sighed softly. "She used to be so pure and gentle. How did she end up like this?" I silently watched him. In his past life, loving her was a regret he carried to the grave, but now that he has her, it turns out to be nothing special. I went to bed early, only to be woken by the choking smoke. A fire broke out in the palace of accumulated purity. The first person who rushed in to save me was Lu Ji. She gritted her teeth, trying to pull me outside, but I was already in an advanced stage of pregnancy. After just a few steps, I couldn't move any further. Seeing her linger around me unwilling to leave, I weakly slapped her and said, "Are you out of your mind? Do you want to die with me? Only if you escape first is there hope of saving me." Those final words moved Lu Ji. Gritting her teeth, she wrapped the bedsheet around herself and rushed out. The scorching tongues of flame spread up the roof beams. I curled up in the corner, hugging my knees, dazed and drowsy. Someone came to stand before me. I made out his face. "It's you." Zhu Jinghe pursed his lips and lifted me up. His eyes were a bit red, as if irritated by the smoke, standing amidst the firelight. He looked even more beautiful. I wrapped my arms around his neck, shifted to a more comfortable position, and lay down at ease. In a daze, there was actually another figure at the door. He stared stiffly in this direction, expressionless. The arsonist was Shentong. She knew she was going to die and wanted to take me down with her. This time, Wei Xian didn't soften at all. He granted her permission to take her own life, then ordered her body to be thrown out of the palace. When I woke up, I met Wei Xian's tearful reddened eyes. He said he remembered everything, remembering how we loved each other in the past life. My heart and eyes are full of him, not a trace of falsehood mixed in. I coughed softly and smiled. In this life, Your Majesty, I feel the same way about you. Wei Xian fell silent. Before, when it was just the two of us, you never called me Your Majesty. I didn't say a word. Husband and wife across 2 lifetimes. They sat facing each other in silence, only an arm's length apart, yet it felt like a world of difference. A long time passed. He spoke. After I was gone, did you live well? I have lived out my years in peace for over 6 decades and passed away naturally in my bed. After a pause, I added, my sister lived just as long as I did, and after death, she was buried together with His Majesty. Your Majesty need not worry. Wei Xian was stunned, his expression complex. So you already know, since you knew I had feelings for Shentong, why did you agree to let her enter the palace? He looked up at me and said, if she hadn't stirred up trouble after entering the palace, we wouldn't have so many rifts between us. Suddenly, I felt weary. I don't understand why he has to dwell on these things. It's wrong to bless them. And it's also wrong to not bless them. What on earth does he want? Or is it that I want them all? I interrupted him listlessly. If I cared about such things, I wouldn't have married you in this second life. Wei Xian's expression suddenly changed. He gripped my chin, his gaze cold as he enunciated each word. If you won't marry me, then whom do you wish to marry? Zhu Jinghe. In his previous life, Wei Xian was wary of a young ruler and the ensuing doubts of the state. Thus, before his death, he secretly left a posthumous edict for the chancellor. If I ever harbor the intention of seizing sole control of the court, let all under heaven punish me. The chancellor at that time was Zhu Jinghe. This top scholar, who came from a humble background, was promoted by Wei Xian and rose rapidly through the ranks in just a few years. The grace of recognition, the bond between ruler and subject, could not be bought by the mere 3,000 taels of gold beneath the cloak. At that time, I had just begun to rule behind the curtain, restless and eager to act, desiring power, yet fearing that the imperial edict might indeed sentence me to death. Zhu Jinghe was like a sword hanging over my head, keeping me restless day and night. I feared him greatly, and from that fear, hatred grew. I hated him. This upright and refined gentleman who stood on the opposite side of me. I tried sending assassins after him, but in the end, he stormed into my palace, reeking of blood, and coldly tossed the assassin's corpse before me. Then he lifted his eyes and casually studied my pale face, with such a faint heart. Your Majesty the Dowager, you still dare to kill. If I die, that edict will be known to the whole world immediately. With you as my burial companion, I would have no regrets even in death. The bloody, severed head rolled to the hem of my skirt, tears in my eyes. I glared furiously at that extraordinarily delicate and beautiful face. Only one thought remained in my mind: to dirty him, to make it impossible for him to ever return to Wei Xian's side. It was a palace banquet. Zhu Jinghe woke up to find his limbs bound to the bedposts. He looked at me, his dark eyes full of disgust. Do you really think that by torturing me, I would tell you where the late emperor's edict is? Your Highness underestimates me too much. My loyalty to the late emperor is clear for the heavens to see. Before he could finish, I leaned down and pressed my lips to his. I was not trying to seduce Zhu Jinghe. It is simply the principle of the sovereign being the guide for his subjects. He has been intimate with me, whether willingly or not. It is still a betrayal of Wei Xian. Whether he dies of shame or comes over to my side, I do not care. I only hope he will no longer stand in my way. But I underestimated Zhu Jinghe. The next day at court, his expression was calm, without a ripple of emotion. The bright red wound on his lip was like a petal adorning it. I was furious. He was tied up once more. This time I meant business. Stripping him completely naked and stepping on his chest, he knelt on the ground, staring at me expressionlessly. Enduring the humiliation, I sneered, You really are Wei Xian's loyal dog. The Empress Dowager should act with dignity. He looked up and retorted sarcastically. Their eyes met. I took off my outer robe, revealing my lustrous skin. His breathing faltered for a moment, and he wearily closed his eyes. You really will stop at nothing. I forcibly occupied Zhu Jinghe for 3 years in the imperial court. We were locked in fierce opposition, as incompatible as fire and water, behind the green gauze curtains. However, he would bite the back of my neck and refuse to let go, his eyes turning red as we clung to each other in passion. Every time he looked at me with an expression of enduring humiliation, I couldn't resist kissing him, never keeping my mouth idle. My dear minister, I'm afraid I'm starting to fall in love with you. When are you getting married? I plan to dash my head and die on that very day. If you say you like me, I'll consider giving you my exclusive favor. It's not just Zhu Jing and one male favorite, those who are more obedient than him, younger, stronger. Yet I have to admit, Zhu Jinghe is the one who suits my taste best. Gradually, most of my male favorites quietly disappeared. I lost my temper, but he remained indifferent. Isn't one minister enough for the Empress Dowager? The way he reveled in my favor, utterly insufferable, but at that time, I didn't have the energy to tangle with him. A plague broke out south of the Yangtze River. The people were restless, and someone had to take charge. The emperor was still young, so I had to be the one to go. I didn't want to make a big fuss, so I set off secretly under the cover of night. It was only upon arriving in Jiangnan that everyone came to know. Zhu Jinghe rushed over the very next day. He roughly pulled me into the room, his dark pupils stormy with anger, and berated me harshly. Are you out of your mind? I looked at his exasperated expression and said with a faint smile, what's the matter with you, my loyal minister? If I really died, shouldn't you be happy? 3 months in Jiangnan, I immersed myself in the epidemic zone, tending to the victims personally. Zhu Jinghe stayed by my side without leaving me for a moment. One day, I was feeding medicine to a little girl who was seriously ill. She couldn't swallow it and instead vomited all the medicine onto me. For the first time, Zhu Jinghe's expression changed. Since then, he has refused to let me go to the scene again. I sneered. As the Empress Dowager, I naturally should share the hardships of my people. Why would you, my dear minister, try to stop me? Zhu Jinghe looked at me, his face pale. He knelt down, prostrating himself at my feet, and said in a trembling voice, I beg you, don't put yourself in harm's way anymore. I'm scared. By the last sentence, his voice had already begun to choke. I am also afraid of that imperial edict. On the death anniversary of Wei Xian, I got drunk in front of his spirit tablet. None of the palace maids could persuade me, and in the end, they brought Zhu Jinghe, right there before Wei Xian's spirit tablet. I pulled him into my arms, looking pitiful and adorable. Zhu Jinghe, if only that edict had never existed. I like you. I want to live a good life with you. Hand over that edict, and I'll give up being the Empress Dowager. Let's run away together. I stood on tiptoe and kissed him, but he remained unruffled. If Her Highness truly could let go of wealth and glory, she would have no need to fear any last decree. How infuriating. Yet I still have one final trick up my sleeve. I secretly instructed my trusted aide to contact a group of mountain bandits. The bandits took the money and caused chaos along our way back to Jiangnan. Amid the clash of swords and blades, I held Zhu Jinghe tightly in my arms, blocked a poisoned arrow for him, but now lies on the brink of death himself. He held my hand tightly, his palm was ice cold. With my eyes closed, I said, Zhu Jinghe, I'm dying. He remained silent the whole time. I carefully kissed the back of his hand. Then I realized that a piece of paper had somehow appeared in my hand. It was the imperial edict. Zhu Jinghe's gaze fell upon my pale face. He saw the ecstasy in my eyes and said softly, as gentle as a silver needle, take the antidote now. You win. Coming back to my senses, I said meekly, your servant and Minister Zhu will work together to nurture the new emperor and manage the court affairs. Wei Xian gave me a deep glance. I don't know whether he believed it or not. He just sneered coldly. Regardless of what your past lives were like, in this life, I will not die young. Shen Lanshu, you can only be my empress. I obediently acknowledged. Wei Xian had carried a lung condition with him since the womb. It was not a serious concern in his previous life. An accidental fall into water allowed the wind cold to invade his body, leading to his untimely death. Thus, He certainly had grounds to speak in such a manner, but he had no idea in my previous life. I asked the imperial physician, cigarette ash is also a major cause of lung disease flare-ups. That fire wasn't set by Shentong, I framed her. On the day I gave birth, Wei Xian fell ill. He collapsed before he could even see the twin boy and girl. The imperial physician said he wouldn't live much longer. Wiping away tears, I knelt before him. Holding the child in my arms, the concubines and consorts knelt in a row behind me. Wei Xian woke up slowly, staring at the drifting green gauze curtains, and let out a hoarse laugh. Everyone out, the Empress stays. He stared at me, his eyes half pain and half anger. Why, Shentong is dead. No one can threaten your position anymore. Lan Shu, why do you still want to kill me? His eyes reddened, and he sneered, aren't you afraid that I might issue an imperial edict to have you buried with me? I looked at him without a trace of fear. If I die, what will become of those two children? The regent from the previous life has already been demoted to a commoner by His Majesty. Apart from your servant, Your Majesty now has no one else to entrust. Wei Xian glared at me with resentment. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye, but I wiped it away. He closed his eyes and murmured my birth name, Lan Shu. Just as in the previous life, I held his hand and said mournfully, I have already sent someone to retrieve your sister's body. Rest assured, I will have you buried together. Wei Xian said hoarsely, I do not wish to be buried with her. You are my wife. You should be buried with me. Lan Shu, you cannot be buried with anyone else. I will wait for you. Lan Shu, please don't hate me anymore. I quietly placed my hand beneath his nose. My palm was cold. He struggled violently, his breathing growing weaker and weaker, until finally it faded away beneath my palm. I had resented him. Yet that shallow resentment had long since faded silently into oblivion over the 40 years I spent as the Empress Dowager. On the contrary, I even felt a bit of pity for him. He had been on the throne for less than a year. He left behind no biological heir. Victory goes to the victor. He was incompetent. I stood up and pushed open the large door. The man knelt outside the hall and prostrated himself before me. He addressed me, Empress Dowager. I wanted to speak, yet something seemed to lodge in my throat. In her previous life, I could have chosen not to kill Zhu Jinghe, but his prestige in the court was too high. If he hadn't died, I would never have felt at ease. If he doesn't die, half the court will stand against me. I managed to obtain the late emperor's will by deceit. I presented Zhu Jinghe with a cup of poisoned wine, as if he had long expected this day. He sneered, won't you warm the wine for your minister before bestowing it? Before I could answer, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me without a trace of expression. Just as I was about to suffocate, he released me, raised the poisoned wine, and toasted me from afar. Empress Dowager, may you live 100 years. What I promised Zhu Jinghe in my past life, I have fulfilled in this life. He and I can live a long life together now. Great. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. Father says I burned my brain when I was a child, so there are many things I don't understand, but I do know that I married the best husband. He always says I'm foolish, but he loves to pinch my cheeks and tell me I'm adorably silly. Later, he was conscripted to go to war, promising to return by autumn, but I waited and waited, until all the leaves had fallen, only to have my brother-in-law bring back a cold, lifeless wooden plaque every day. I would go to the grave on the back hill to keep him company, bringing freshly picked wild fruits, until one day, I accidentally overheard under the window, there are plenty of ways to repay a favor. Why must I marry a fool? She clings to me all day, and I've long grown tired of it. This is so much better now. I take care of my sister-in-law on behalf of my elder brother, and you help look after that fool. It's a win-win situation. Only then did I realize that he had already returned long ago. If you were truly tired of me, you could have just said so. Why did you have to fake your death to deceive me? The next day, Father came again to ask if I wanted to remarry. I nodded gently, pulled off the white velvet flower I had worn for a year, and tossed it into the stove. I was washing the freshly picked wild fruits by the stream, the bright red fruits rolling around in the bamboo basket. Silly Xiaotang, your husband has been gone for over a year now. Why are you still wearing that white flower? Aunt Zhong paused her pounding with the wooden club and glanced at me sideways. She can't even remember the dates. Her brain is fried. Granny Lee passed by with her vegetable basket, sneering, "A fool who brings misfortune to her husband." With that, the two of them burst into laughter. I angrily grabbed a wild fruit and threw it at her. I know the dates. After Chengyi left, I would go sit by the grave on the back hill every day. Each time I went, I would place a foxtail grass there. Of course I knew the date. The bamboo basket suddenly tilted, and the wild fruits all tumbled gulu into the stream. I hurriedly reached to scoop them up, my sleeves completely soaked, and the cold made me shiver. Their laughter grew even louder. Here, Sister Arshyang, the tofu seller, crouched down and helped me retrieve the wild fruits that had drifted away one by one. Don't mind them. Her eyes were red, either from crying earlier or on the verge of tears again. It seems since her husband left, her eyes have always been this red. I smiled at Sister Arshyang, and she sighed, "Silly girl. You've become a widow at such a young age. How can you still manage to smile?" I tilted my head and thought for a moment. Widow, I think I heard someone mention it on the day Chengyi was buried too. They said that, like Sister Arshyang, I had become a widow and would never see my husband again. I was deeply saddened by this for a long time, but later I realized that I could go to the back hill every day to chat with Chengyi for a while, telling him all the interesting things that happened in the village one by one. When he was still here, he always complained that I talked too much, but now he can quietly listen to everything I have to say. This is actually quite nice. Xiaotang, you're back. When I got home, my mother-in-law was airing out the bedding in the yard. Seeing me come in, she smiled and waved. Your eldest brother brought some candied dates from the county town and saved half a pack for you. My eyes lit up. Honey dates. Chengyi used to buy them for me often. My mother-in-law knew I loved them and always saved the biggest and sweetest ones for me. Eat slowly, don't choke, my mother-in-law said with a smile. Tomorrow, let's go to the market and pick out some new fabric for you to make clothes. You've been wearing this plain dress for over a year now. She suddenly stopped speaking, as if remembering something, her eyes slightly reddening before she turned and went inside. I happily finished half a pack of candied dates in the yard and was about to go inside to thank my elder brother-in-law when I suddenly heard hushed voices coming from the room. "Yeah, Xiaotang is, after all, your lawfully wedded wife." "Yeah, why does mother-in-law call the elder brother Yeah? But the elder brother's name is clearly Cheng Yong." I tiptoed closer to the window. "Mother, keep your voice down," said the elder brother Cheng Yong. "Don't let that little fool hear." Little fool, Chengyi used to love calling me that. My fingertip suddenly stung. I had accidentally pressed it against a splinter on the bamboo curtain. "It's been over a year. And she still goes to your elder brother's grave every day. This can't go on like this." My mother-in-law whispered, "If she wants to go, let her go. Why do you care? But, if it weren't for her saving you back then, there are plenty of ways to repay a favor. Why should I have to marry a fool?" The voice suddenly rose, then dropped sharply. "She's been clinging to me all day long. I've long been annoyed by it. I've always envied my elder brother for being able to marry such a virtuous wife as Wanna. Now it's perfect. I'll take care of sister-in-law for my brother, and you can look after that fool. It's a win-win situation." My mother-in-law sighed. "If Xiaotang ever finds out, I'm afraid she'll be heartbroken again. She's a fool." "How would she ever find out?" Chengyi sneered. "She still greets me with a smile and calls me big brother every time we meet." The sweetness of the candied date suddenly rose in my throat, so cloying that I felt the urge to cough. I crouched down, hugging my knees, watching the ants coming and going in the brick crevices, my eyes feeling a bit sore. "If you're annoyed, you can just tell me directly. Why do you have to pretend to be dead? Xiaotang, what are you doing crouching here?" My mother-in-law's voice came from above, startling me. I was watching the ants move. I quickly wiped my eyes with my sleeve. "They're so clever, they know it's going to rain." I looked up and saw Chengyi standing at the door. His face frighteningly pale. He rushed over in a few quick steps, grabbing my arm tightly. "What did you hear?" His grip hurt, but I didn't dare cry out. Nothing. I was just watching the little ants." Chengyi suddenly let go, his eyes red. My mother-in-law sighed. "Xiaotang, go wash your hands and eat." I ate too many candied dates. I lowered my head and ran into the room. "I want to lie down for a while." After closing the door, I heard my mother-in-law say outside, "You scared her." Chengyi's voice was muffled. "Mother." I didn't listen anymore, climbed onto the bed and covered my head with the blanket. thinking, I'm not stupid. I know he was afraid I'd hear those words, but the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't help feeling wronged. After all, it was him who wanted me to be his wife back then when we were kids. Our families lived close by, and he always loved taking me out to play. That winter was especially cold, and the pond had frozen over with a thick layer of ice. He was being playful and stepped onto the ice, but suddenly, he fell through. Without a second thought, I plunged into the icy hole to pull him out. I managed to save him, but I ended up shivering all over from the cold. As soon as I got back, I came down with a high fever for 3 whole days and nights. My forehead was burning hot. After the fever broke, my mind started to feel a bit slow, and my memory worsened. None of the children in the village wanted to play with me, only Cheng. He didn't mind me. He would fiercely chase away the kids who bullied me and secretly slip me candies to eat. One time, his mother held my hand and shed tears. It was to save Ye that you ended up like this. When you grow up, let Ye marry you and take good care of you for the rest of your life. I blinked and asked Cheng Yi, if I become your wife, can I play with you every day? He nodded solemnly, yes, and I can buy you candy every day too, so I happily replied, then when I grow up, I'll be your bride. On my coming-of-age ceremony, I truly put on the red wedding dress and married him. He loved to call me little fool, but he always remembered to bring me candied fruits from the county town. In winter, afraid that I would be cold, he would warm up the bed for me first until later, when his eldest brother married Sister Wana. Sister Wana was beautiful, spoke softly and gently, and the flowers she embroidered could attract butterflies. Cheng Yi often started comparing me to her. Look how virtuous sister-in-law is, unlike you, who can't even embroider a handkerchief properly. Sister-in-law never says much, so why are you chattering all day long? I secretly tried learning embroidery, pricking my fingers until they were covered in blood spots, but the patterns I stitched still came out crooked. Then I tried staying silent all day, but he ended up teasing me instead. Little fool, you're more adorable when you talk more. So I always thought he only complained with his words, but in his heart, he still cherished me. But hearing these words today, I finally understand that he has always liked a woman like Sister Wana. He faked his death just so he could be with Sister Wana openly, without having to face a little fool like me anymore. All those foolish things I said at the graveside every day this past year, I was actually saying them to my brother-in-law. He always used to laugh at me, and now, down in the underworld, he must be laughing even harder. The more I thought about it, the more wronged I felt, and the more I thought, the more miserable I became. So I started crying again, crying and crying. I drifted off into a hazy sleep. The next day, my father came to see me. Seeing my eyes swollen like walnuts, he asked me again, my girl, do you want to remarry? Every time he asked before, I would shake my head and say, if I leave, no one will keep Cheng Yi company, he'll be lonely. But this time, I rubbed my sore eyes, looked up at him, and asked, will he think I'm foolish? Father's eyes reddened instantly. His rough hand gently stroked my head as he said, no, he'll adore you too much to even think that. I pulled off the white velvet flower I had worn for a year, tossed it into the stove, and nodded, all right, then I'll marry him. After father left, I felt a hollow emptiness in my heart and decided to go to the courtyard for some fresh air. As soon as I stepped out, I saw Cheng Yi and Sister Wana playing chess under the phoenix tree. Cheng Yi was frowning, looking completely absorbed in the game. I stood at the doorway, not daring to approach. Cheng Yi hated being disturbed the most when playing chess. In the past, when I brought him tea and accidentally bumped the board, he would scold me harshly, saying, little fool, don't cause trouble. Checkmate. Sister Wana smiled as she placed her piece. Cheng Yi shook his head and laughed. Wana is still the best. Neither of them noticed me. I looked down at the tips of my shoes, thinking to myself, Sister Wana is truly amazing. She can play chess and embroider flowers. No wonder Cheng Yi enjoys spending time with her. I can't even recognize all the chess pieces. Xiao Tang, my mother-in-law's voice came from behind me. Why are you standing here in a daze? Before I could answer, my mother-in-law had already taken my hand and was leading me toward the tree. Come, I've just washed some fruit. Cheng Yi looked up and saw me, the smile at the corner of his lips fading almost instantly. Wana, however, was warm and friendly. Xiao Tang, you're here. Would you like to learn how to play chess? She could never learn something like this. Cheng Yi chuckled. Turning away to gather the chess pieces, my heart sank, and I tugged at my mother-in-law's sleeve, whispering softly, "Mother, my father was just here, he said he's found a family for me. I might have to remarry." With a clatter, the chess piece in Cheng Yi's hand fell onto the board and rolled onto the floor. "What?" The mother-in-law was shocked, dropping the fruits in her hand all over the floor. "When did this happen? Which family is it?" I shook my head. "My father didn't explain clearly." Cheng Yi suddenly sneered, "You're getting married without even knowing who the other party is. Aren't you afraid of being sold off and still helping them count the money?" My face flushed bright red. "My father said it's a good family. He wouldn't harm me." My mother-in-law quickly tried to smooth things over. "Yonga means well. With you being such a fool, what decent family would ever want you?" Cheng Yi laughed again. "Stop dreaming. My father said they don't mind that I'm foolish." I mumbled resentfully. "Only a fool would believe that, Yonga," my mother-in-law scolded, then took my hand and said gently, "Xiaotang, are you unhappy here? I know it's not easy for you to be a widow. With Yi gone, I'll treat you twice as well." I stole a glance at Cheng Yi. He was staring intently at the chessboard, his knuckles turning white, yet he still maintained an indifferent expression. "It's not that. Mother treats me very well." I twisted the corner of my clothes. "It's just, my father said that a girl should have a place to belong." Cheng Yi suddenly stood up, scattering the chess pieces all over the floor. "If she wants to leave, let her go. Once she hits a wall out there, she'll realize that a fool like her is unwelcome everywhere." Sister Wanna gently tugged at his sleeve, but he shook her off and walked away without looking back. She glanced at me, then at mother-in-law, sighed softly, and hurried after him. My mother-in-law held me close, tears streaming down her face. "Silly child, your brother may have spoken harshly, but he only said it out of concern for you. Now that you're leaving, my heart." I lowered my head, twisting the corner of my clothes in silence, watching as a light rain suddenly began to fall from the sky. "Mother, look, it's really raining." The ants are truly clever. They know to hide early when it rains, unlike me, who didn't realize Cheng Yi thought I was foolish and still went to see him every day. The drizzle moistened my eyelashes, and I blinked. "Once I'm gone, Cheng Yi won't have to pretend to be the elder brother-in-law every day. He should be quite happy, right?" 3 days later, father came to take me home, and I hurried back to my room to pack my things. He said the new family had everything, so I didn't need to bring too much, but I couldn't bear to leave things behind. I had to look over each and every one of them. "This one I'll take, this one I won't," I muttered to myself as I folded the clothes, when suddenly I felt something hard at the bottom of the chest. It was the small wooden rabbit Cheng Yi had given me, though one of its ears was somehow missing a corner. I held the little rabbit in my hands and stared blankly for a while. I remember it was in the first year of our marriage when Cheng Yi returned from the county town and mysteriously pulled this out from his chest. "You little fool, does it look like you?" He laughed and poked the rabbit's three-lip mouth at the time. I was so happy that I even slept with it at night. But later, for some reason, it ended up tucked away at the bottom of a box. "Xiaotang, come quickly and see the wedding dress." Father called out in the courtyard. I hurriedly stuffed the little rabbit into my bundle and ran out to see. In the courtyard, 2 matrons were shaking out a bright red wedding dress. The color was so vibrant, just like the one I wore when I married Cheng Yi all those years ago. "It's so beautiful." I reached out and touched the delicate embroidery on the sleeve. "How was it finished so quickly?" Father chuckled as he stroked his beard. "We hired a master craftsman from the city to start working on it 2 months ago. Just waiting for your approval." "Does it look good?" I casually draped the wedding dress over myself. "Beautiful, beautiful," Father replied, his eyes crinkling into slits as he smiled. "That Zhao boy is a lucky one." Clang! The courtyard gate was suddenly kicked open. Cheng Yi stood there, his chest heaving violently, his eyes fixed intently on the wedding dress I was wearing. "Uncle Shen." His voice was hoarse. "May I speak with Xiaotang alone for a moment?" Father frowned and looked at me. I gave a slight nod. Back in the room, Cheng Yi followed me in and closed the door behind him. "Are you really going to marry him?" "Yes," I nodded. I asked my father. "It's the Zhao family from West Village." "I know," he interrupted me. "Zhao Huijin, 23 years old, teaches at the county school." With every word he spoke, his face grew a shade paler. "You know everything." I widened my eyes in surprise. "How do you know even more than I do? Is knowing all that enough?" He suddenly grabbed my wrist. Does he hit people? Does he drink? Does he kick the blankets off at night? Do you know any of that? I was stunned by his questions. And could only whisper, he doesn't mind that I'm foolish. Cheng Yi's hand suddenly let go. He stood up with his back to me, his shoulders slumping. Yeah, I don't mind you being foolish. His voice was as light as a sigh. Such good conditions. Father's coughing came from outside. He was urging us. I stood up, stuffing the last piece of clothing into the bundle. I'm leaving. When I reached the door, I turned back, pulled the small wooden rabbit out of the bundle. Here, I shoved the little rabbit into his hand and whispered, after I'm gone, you won't have to pretend to be dead anymore. Cheng Yi. Cheng Yi's face instantly turned pale, his fingers clutching the little rabbit tightly. You, his voice was a bit hoarse. You really heard? Father coughed a few more times outside, without answering. I hurriedly stepped out the door. Cheng Yi suddenly looked up, as if just realizing what was happening, and made to chase after me, but stopped after taking only one step. Cheng Yong. Father turned back in confusion. What's wrong with you today? Cheng Yi opened his mouth, but not a single word came out. Seeing his flustered expression, I suddenly found it a bit amusing. Don't worry, big brother can't bear to let me go. I smiled at father and took his arm. Father, let's go home quickly. I miss Die Huang. I stole a glance at Cheng Yi, feeling extremely pleased with myself. Bet you didn't expect that one day I'd be the one to get him out of a tight spot. Cheng Yi's face was extremely grim. He remained silent the entire time, just clutching that little rabbit and standing in place until we left. When I got home and pushed open the courtyard gate, Die Huang came barking and pouncing over, nearly knocking me flat on my backside. Die Huang. I crouched down and rubbed its head. Did you miss me? Its wet nose kept nuzzling into my palm, and its tail wagged like a rattledrum. I giggled and dodged its slobber, but it kept chasing after me, licking my fingers while whimpering as if to say, I missed you so much. All right, I said, hugging its furry head. I missed you too. Just as we were playing around, the sound of gongs and drums suddenly came from outside the courtyard gate. Da Huang immediately pricked up its ears and darted out in a flash. I chased after them to the doorway and saw a lively procession heading straight for my house. The steward at the front shouted at the top of his lungs, the Zhao family has come to present the betrothal gifts. I ran back into the courtyard and asked my father in confusion, aren't they supposed to wait for the chosen date to present the betrothal gifts? Why are they here now? Father patted Die Huang's head and laughed heartily. That Zhao boy couldn't wait any longer. He insisted on coming early to present a small betrothal gift as a token of his sincerity. As they were speaking, those people had already reached the courtyard gate. At a glance, I spotted a refined and scholarly-looking young man in the crowd. It had to be Zhao Huijin. No doubt about it, he was wearing a brand new blue gown today. Looking quite sharp, he bowed respectfully and said, Uncle Shen, Miss Shen. The sun shone upon him, making his entire being seem to glow. I stared at him for a long time, feeling as though I had seen him somewhere before. It wasn't until he had someone bring in a small bamboo cage, inside of which 2 snow-white rabbits were twitching their little noses. Do you remember, miss? He asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. We've met before. I suddenly remembered once, I found a rabbit at the foot of the mountain. Its leg was caught in a trap, bleeding heavily and trembling in pain. I carefully picked it up and brought it home. As soon as Cheng Yi saw it, he frowned and said, It's filthy. Throw it out quickly. No. I shielded the rabbit in my arms. It's so pitiful. Can we keep it, please? You can't even take care of yourself. Why bother with these animals? He snatched the rabbit away and was about to throw it out by its ears. I cried and grabbed it back. The rabbit, terrified, kicked its legs frantically in my arms, smearing blood all over me. Cheng Yi grew even angrier. Look at you, making such a mess over an animal. You're really. That night, I hid in the woodshed bandaging the rabbit, clumsily wrapping the gauze in a tangled mess. The rabbit trembled in pain, and I started crying along with it. Cheng Yi suddenly pushed the door open, his face cold. I told you you're clumsy, and you still won't admit it. You can't even bandage a rabbit properly. He reached out to grab it again, but I quickly hugged the rabbit and ran outside, bumping right into someone under the locust tree at the village entrance. Be careful, the person steadied me. Are you alright? I am fine, I sobbed. It's just that the little bunny is dying. He took out a handkerchief, hesitated for a moment, then handed it to me. "Wipe your face." I took the handkerchief, not only wiping away my tears but also blowing my nose loudly. "They all say I'm foolish," I said with grievance. "They say I can't even take care of myself, let alone save it. How could that be?" His eyes sparkled under the moonlight. "Someone who cares so much for little animals is the kindest of all." I looked up at him. Really, this was the first time someone had called me kind. Accustomed to hearing fool and idiot, these two words felt as sweet as honey, warming her heart. He nodded gently, his eyes crinkling into a smile. "Besides, I don't think you're foolish at all. How could someone foolish know to save a little animal?" The night breeze rustled through the locust tree, its leaves whispering softly. He looked at me seriously and said, "Remember, kindness is far more precious than cleverness." Later, he helped me rewrap the rabbit's wound. His hands were incredibly steady, and his movements were gentle. As he bandaged the wound, he taught me, "Wrap the gauze like this so it won't be too tight on it." Before leaving, he slipped a piece of sesame candy into my palm. "Have something sweet, it'll make you feel better. Remember now." Zhao Huijin took a piece of sesame candy from his sleeve, just like the one from back then. "Here, have something sweet, it'll make you feel better." My face flushed with warmth as I lowered my head and took the candy. My fingers accidentally brushed against his palm, and it felt warm. Thank you, Teacher Zhao," I murmured softly, quickly popping the candy into my mouth. The sweet flavor melted on my tongue. "Call me Huijin," he said with a smile. I nodded and mumbled, "Huijin." The two little white rabbits were hopping around in the cage, and I couldn't help but squat down to play with them. Huijin also crouched beside me, teaching me how to feed them vegetable leaves. "Hold them like this," he demonstrated to me, "so they won't bite your fingers." After Father and Huijin spoke for a while, he got up to take his leave. I held the rabbit cage, reluctant to let go, and accompanied him all the way to the main gate. "I'll come back to see them in a few days," Huijin said with a smile. I nodded happily and went back to my room, placing the rabbit cage by the bed. I hummed a little tune as I fed the rabbits some vegetable leaves. Their little noses twitched, which was incredibly adorable. "Do you like it that much?" A cold voice suddenly came from behind me, startling me so much that my hand trembled and the vegetable leaves fell to the ground. Chengyi had somehow caught up and was now standing at the doorway, his face frighteningly dark. "Oh, of course I like it." I instinctively hugged the rabbit cage tighter. "Huijin gave it to me." "Huijin?" His voice suddenly rose sharply. "You call him so intimately?" He glanced back at the red silk boxes piled in the courtyard, then strode over and grabbed my wrist. "Are you really going to marry him?" "Of course," I nodded vigorously. "I've already accepted the betrothal gifts. Look at this little rabbit, isn't it Ada? You're not allowed to marry him." He suddenly cut me off, his eyes reddening. I was startled by his outburst. "Why not? He's not right for you." "But Father said it's suitable." "Are you the one getting married, or is your father?" he suddenly shouted, startling the little rabbit into scurrying around in its cage. Looking at him like this, I suddenly felt wronged. "Weren't you quite happy with Sister Wanna? Why do you care who I marry?" Chengyi's breathing became rapid and heavy, his chest heaving violently. "In any case, you are not allowed to marry. I insist on marrying." I grew stubborn too, holding the rabbit cage up in front of him. "I've already accepted his little rabbit." As soon as I finished speaking, Chengyi suddenly snatched the rabbit cage and flung it to the ground. "No!" I screamed and lunged forward, but I was a step too late. The cage fell to the ground and cracked open, sending the two rabbits scurrying in panic. "My rabbits!" I cried, scrambling to catch them, my knees aching from hitting the floor. Chengyi seemed stunned by his own actions. Standing frozen in place, I crawled over and gathered the trembling little rabbits into my arms, tears falling one after another. "What are you doing? They're so small." "What's wrong, Xiaotang?" Father rushed in with a broom in hand, his face instantly changing at the sight. "Cheng Yong, what are you doing?" Chengyi's lips moved, but he said nothing, turning and running out the door. "Stop!" Father shouted sternly, but Chengyi had already run out of sight. Father stepped forward to help me up. "Xiaotang, did Cheng Yong bully you?" "Dad, he's not Cheng Yong," I sobbed, wiping my tears. "His Chengyi, he never died." Father's body suddenly stiffened, and the broom in his hand clattered to the ground. His face turned from red to pale, then from pale to ashen, and finally became as dark as the bottom of a pot. Fine. Father stomped his feet in anger, his beard bristling. That wretched scoundrel, playing tricks and bullying my daughter. I'll break his legs. I clung desperately to Father's sleeve, my tears falling even harder. Forget it, Dad, let him go. My voice grew softer and softer. He broke my little rabbit. I never want to see him again. A few days later, as I was squatting in the yard stroking the little rabbits, Huaijin indeed came to see them. He was holding a lovely bamboo cage with a small bell hanging from it that jingled whenever the wind blew. This cage is big and sturdy, he said, squatting down. There are several layers of cotton cloth laid at the bottom. I reached out and touched it. It really was much softer. Huaijin took out some green grass from his pocket again. This grass is sweet. Rabbits love it. The little rabbit caught the scent and hopped happily into the new cage. I clapped my hands joyfully. They really like it. During lunch, he quietly moved the spicy diced chicken farther away and carefully picked out all the fish bones for me. I bit my chopsticks and stared off into space. Even Cheng Yi couldn't remember that I don't eat spicy food, so how did he know? As we were leaving, he suddenly slipped an oil paper package into my hand. I heard you like these. I opened it and saw candied dates, each one coated in sugar glaze, sparkling in the sunlight. I leaned against the window, watching him walk away until his blue robe disappeared around the corner of the alley. That night, I had an especially sweet dream. In the dream, Huaijin kept stuffing candied fruits into my arms one packet after another. His eyes curved into crescents as he said, "Take your time eating." I was overjoyed. The next morning, I woke up to find that the oil paper package had been nibbled at a corner. It must have been that greedy Da Huang sneaking a bite in the middle of the night. Fuming, I thought about telling Huaijin, but then I suddenly realized I seemed to be already looking forward to seeing him again later on. Huaijin came even more frequently. Sometimes he would bring a branch of red plum blossoms, still sparkling with tiny ice crystals. Other times, he would pull a warm, roasted sweet potato from his cotton-padded coat, breaking it open to release a sweet, steaming aroma. Once, while the snow was falling heavily, he arrived with a head full of snowflakes, still clutching a warm little hand warmer inside his coat. On such a cold day, why not come back after the snow stops? I quickly pulled him inside, hastily brushing the snowflakes off his clothes. His nose was red from the cold, but he pulled a few pieces of dried grass from his sleeve. "I promised to teach you how to weave a little rabbit yesterday. Look, I soaked the grass in warm water to soften it. It'll be easy to weave now." "You silly Huaijin," I burst out laughing. "It's not like I have to learn it today." As soon as I said it, I froze. It's actually my turn to call someone silly now. And here's this. He pulled out another warm, oil-stained paper packet from his sleeve and placed it in my hand. As soon as I opened it, wow, it was sugar-roasted chestnuts. They smelled so fragrant, and the shells had cracked open as if smiling. I was peeling chestnuts and got my hands all sticky with sugar juice. So Huaijin took out a handkerchief to wipe my hands. The handkerchief was fragrant, and it smelled just as good as he did. "Huaijin," I said while eating chestnuts and counting on my fingers, "you've already come 11 times this month." His eyes curved into two little crescents as he smiled. "Our Xiaotang has such a good memory." Father poked his head out from the kitchen, still holding a spatula in his hand. "Huaijin, coming here every day in this freezing cold, won't the children at the school start complaining?" The tips of Huaijin's ears instantly turned red, and he stammered, I came during the lunch break. I can still make it to the afternoon class." As he spoke, he slipped another peeled chestnut into my hand warm, just like the palm of his hand. As the new year approached, Huaijin came to help Father put up the spring festival couplets on the bright red paper. His calligraphy looked like little figures dancing gracefully. "Xiao Tang," he suddenly called me, the paste brush in his hand trembling. "After the new year, I want to ask Uncle Shen to pick a date." I stood on tiptoe to paste the character, Fortune, asking without turning my head, "What date?" When I turned around, I saw his face was redder than the spring festival couplets, and he stammered, It's the day to bring you home." Father was standing at the door at some point, clearing his throat. "I think the 8th day of the 2nd month is a good day." Huaijin's eyes suddenly lit up as he pulled out a small cloth bundle from his chest. When he opened it, there were two small wooden figurines inside. The little girl with pigtails had smiling, crescent-shaped eyes, while the boy, who looked like a scholar, was still holding a book. I carved it for a long time. His hands trembled with nervousness. Do you think it looks like us? It looks exactly like us. I turned the little wooden figures over and over in my hands, then tucked them into my embrace like a treasure. Huai Jin, you're the best. That day happened to be the Lantern Festival, and the festive lanterns on the street were dazzlingly bright. Huai Jin bought me a chubby little rabbit lantern, and I hopped and skipped all the way home carrying it. The candle flame inside the lantern flickered, making the shadows on the ground dance along. As soon as I entered the door, I held up the lantern and brought it close to the rabbit hutch. Look, this is your little lantern brother Tilda. The little rabbits were so frightened they burrowed into the haystack, their noses twitching nervously. I quickly set the lantern on the ground and picked up one of the rabbits to comfort it. It's all my fault. I stroked the rabbit's soft fur, suddenly remembering Huai Jin had said that rabbits are easily frightened. I won't scare you again next time. Suddenly, with a loud bang, the courtyard gate was slammed and began to shake violently. Cheng Yi stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. His eyes were frighteningly red. The stubble on his chin was a mess. Nothing like the always clean and tidy Cheng Yi from before. He knelt before me with a loud thud, his knees hitting the ground hard. Xiao Tang. His voice was terribly hoarse. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I regret it. I truly regret it. How could I have been so blinded back then? He knelt and shuffled forward, trying to grab my sleeve. Come home with me, please. I promise I'll never. I stepped back in fright, and the rabbit in my arms burrowed deeper into my embrace. I can't. I shook my head. Huai Jin and I are getting married. The date is already set. His face instantly turned deathly pale. When? February 8th, I replied softly. Are you coming to the wedding banquet? Cheng Yi suddenly laughed, but the sound was more painful than crying. Wedding banquet? Xiao Tang, do you have to be so cruel? I stroked the trembling little rabbit in my arms and thought, he was the one who abandoned me first, so why is he now saying I'm cruel? Cheng Yi, father charged in, holding a broom. How dare you show your face here? The broom struck Cheng Yi's back heavily, and he grunted but refused to dodge. Father, go ahead and hit me. I'll accept it even if you beat me to death. Who's your father? Dad trembled with anger, striking down with the broom again. You pretended to be dead and bullied my daughter, and now you have the nerve to ask for forgiveness. Cheng Yi staggered from the blows but remained kneeling upright, hiding behind my father. I saw his eyes were red. Xiao Tang. I tugged at my father's sleeve and shook it gently. Dad, let him go. Father shoved Cheng Yi out and slammed the door shut with a loud bang. I thought that would be the end of it, but the next morning, when I pushed open the window, I saw Cheng Yi kneeling outside the courtyard gate. He was covered in snow, looking like a snowman. Father went out cursing and scolding to drive him away, but Cheng Yi seemed nailed to the ground, unmovable no matter how hard he was pulled. In the end, Father had no choice but to let him be. By evening, Cheng Yi could no longer hold on and collapsed to the ground with a thud. Though Father scolded him, he couldn't bear to leave him there and eventually had someone carry him back to the Cheng residence. I heard that after he returned, he ran a high fever and kept rambling deliriously. A few days later, Sister Wanna and my mother-in-law came to see me, their eyes swollen like walnuts. Wanna's tears fell pattering. Xiao Tang, I'm sorry. My mother-in-law held my hand, trembling. Good child. Mother also deceived you. I stood there in a daze, not knowing what to say. Wanna suddenly knelt down. I knew all along that he wasn't Brother Yong. She was trembling as she cried. But I'm afraid of becoming a widow at such a young age, so I just let the mistake continue. He refuses to take his medicine properly now, and keeps calling out to see you. I know I have no right to ask you, but, Xiao Tang, my mother-in-law knelt down as well. Mother knows our Cheng family has wronged you, but Ye truly regrets his mistakes. I beg you, come back with me to see him just once. I lowered my head, staring at the mud stains on the tips of my shoes. My heart tangled like a mess of threads, but in the end, I just shook my head and whispered, you all go back. I'll have a new home soon. The matter between Cheng Yi and me quickly spread through the village. Some said he was infatuated, some said he deserved it, and others called me heartless. When Huai Jin came to see me, He brought a bag of freshly roasted chestnuts. He didn't ask anything. Just sat beside me and peeled them one by one to feed me. Is it sweet? He asked. I nodded, broke the chestnut meat in half, and stuffed one half into his mouth. Xiao Tang, Huijin suddenly said, if you want to go see him. I leaned closer into his embrace and asked him seriously, Huijin, if I don't go see him, is that really cruel? He gently stroked my hair. Kindness is not weakness, and refusal is not cruelty. Do what you want to do, and no one can force you to do what you don't want to. I nodded with a vague understanding. Then I won't go. In the blink of an eye, it was the 8th day of the 2nd month, and the weather that day was absolutely perfect. I was munching on the sugar roasted chestnuts Huijin had brought me when the wedding planner burst into the room in a flurry. The bride is still eating. It's time to leave. I hurriedly stuffed the remaining half bag of chestnuts into my sleeve and boarded the bridal sedan chair wearing that bright red wedding dress. The tassels on the bridal veil swayed back and forth, making me want to sneeze. As the wedding attendant helped me out of the sedan chair, it suddenly became eerily quiet outside. I couldn't resist lifting a corner of the veil and saw Chengyi standing at the Zhao family's doorstep. He was terribly thin, his face as pale as paper, but his eyes were frighteningly red. Xiao Tang, he called out to me in a hoarse voice, so faint it was almost inaudible. Huijin instinctively stepped in front of me. I tugged at his sleeve and peeked out from behind him. Chengyi, are you here for the wedding feast? Chengyi's lips trembled violently. I came to. The bride cannot lift her own veil. The wedding matron exclaimed anxiously, stomping her foot, then muttered under her breath, what a foolish girl. Suddenly, Chengyi fell to his knees with a thud, startling everyone. Xiao Tang, I've wronged you. I deceived you. I betrayed you. I deserve to suffer the consequences. He took the small wooden rabbit out from his embrace. Its ears had been mended perfectly. I know you hate me, but could you give me one more chance? I don't hate you. I tilted my head to look at him. Huijin says that hating someone takes so much energy. I'd rather save that energy for peeling sugar-roasted chestnuts. Chengyi froze, his expression as if he had been punched in the face. I added, Huijin also said that if you promise to be good to someone, you have to keep being good to them. You promised to be good to Xiao Tang, but you didn't keep your word. I looked into his eyes and said seriously, so, I can't give you another chance either. Chengyi froze for a moment, then suddenly burst into laughter, laughing so hard that tears streamed down his face. You don't hate me. You actually don't hate me. The little rabbit slipped from his hand, and he staggered to his feet, pushing through the crowd like a drunkard. A child pointed at him and shouted, madman, madman, but he seemed not to hear. Stumbling away into the distance, I watched his reeling figure, utterly unable to understand. He's really strange. Isn't it good that I don't hate him? I tugged at the matchmaker's sleeve. Granny, why does he look so unhappy? The matchmaker sighed and gently patted my hand. Silly girl, sometimes not hating hurts more than hating. As she spoke, she seemed to suddenly realize something. Quick, put the bridal veil back on. Put it on. I quickly lowered the bridal veil, and once again, my vision was filled with nothing but a sea of red. The celebratory music began to play again, and Huijin's warm hand held mine tightly. I could feel a slight dampness in his palm, yet he still led me steadily toward the wedding hall. First bow to heaven and earth. I knelt down properly, while Huijin nearly tripped over his own robe hem, causing all the guests in the hall to burst into laughter. Second bow to the parents. Father secretly wiped away tears from his seat, and I could hear him sniffing, bow to each other. As I bent down, the bridal veil suddenly slipped to one side, and I happened to see Huijin's ears flushed bright red. He hurriedly reached out to fix it for me but ended up pulling the entire veil off amid the uproarious laughter in the hall. Huijin stared at me in a daze and suddenly whispered softly, my lady. I blinked, then grinned and said, that sounds wonderful. Chengyi used to only call me little fool, so this is how it feels to be called wife. Huijin seemed to have found some treasure, calling out again and again, wife, wife, wife. Each call was gentler than the last. The wedding matron anxiously slapped her thigh beside them. Oh dear, don't be so impatient, groom, it's not time for the wedding chamber yet. Huijin had already scooped me up into his arms and was striding toward the backyard amid a chorus of teasing cheers. I buried my face against his chest, listening to his heart beat fast and loud, like a rabbit hopping wildly inside in the bridal chamber, illuminated by the glow of red candles. He laid me down on the wedding bed, which was covered with red dates and peanuts, and called out once more, "My bride." This time, I didn't answer. I simply reached out and touched his burning cheek. Outside, Big Yellow was chasing his own tail in circles in the courtyard, while father and the guests were still drinking and laughing in the front yard. Suddenly remembering something, I pulled out that half packet of chestnuts from my sleeve and rustled one open. "Would you like a chestnut? They're really sweet." He smiled and shook his head, gently blowing out the red candle. "There are more important things to do." His voice suddenly became as sticky and sweet as honey held tightly in his embrace. Breathing in his pleasant scent, I couldn't help but burrow deeper into his arms. I thought to myself, I must tell him tomorrow the chestnuts today were sweeter than usual. After hearing the 2 stories above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.